Okay, welcome. This is a kickoff meeting for doing some merchant work for the Bitcoin Design Guide. And right now we're currently in the Bitcoin Design Guide in the middle of trying to wrap up a pretty big milestone um, regarding the daily spending wallet. But there's been a lot of kind of discussion about merchant related content over the past several months in the community. So um, I decided to try and get together this kickoff call just so that we can go ahead and get some discussion about how we might tackle such a section, and then once we kind of have wrapped up the daily spending wallet, we'll kind of be hopefully ready to move on some of this stuff. Um, Christoph here put together a outline document back in April, and several of us started jumping into um, the document and adding things that we thought. I mean, I guess I'd kind of phrase this as being kind of a collection of details that people might like to see in a merchant section, and um, there's a lot to take in here. There's a lot of different perspectives and angles and all of that. And so kind of before this call, I tried to distill that down into what where some of this content might live in the guide. And I put that into a document here called Merchant Table of Contents, and um, all that. And I just want to walk through like real quickly this, and then just kind of open it up for just free discussion about, you know, this document, my document, whatever. Um, I think that, there's a lot of discussion here about like, okay, should we be talking about in-person point of sale terminals? Should we be talking about online point of sale terminals? What kind of like business size are we dealing with? What kind of different business sizes and different types of businesses are going to necessitate different types of point of sale terminals. Someone who's running a cafe in El Salvador and someone who's running an online store might have two different use cases. There's also lots of stuff about kind of like the back office. How does the merchant manage their funds? How do they manage who has access kind of to their business? And then, there's also this kind of discussion about, representing fiat within, merchant point of sale terminals as well, and different types of currency. So there's been lots of different discussion about different ideas there. And I kind of highlighted what I thought would be some good areas in the guide where this types of content might live. So currently in the guide, we have this, section called personal finance. And I was curious if this page, we have kind of use cases here for day-to-day spending, for monthly budgeting, emergency funds. I was curious to know if, a business might fit into one of these use cases here, running a business on top of Bitcoin. Another kind of section that we have is our reference design concept. So just kind of, again, going back to the Bitcoin Design Guide for a second, for those who might not be aware, we've been following this kind of reference design paradigm where the reference design is sort of like a pre-built product that you can take and run with and then tweak to your needs. So to me, it seems like an obvious use case might be having a merchant, point of sale terminal somewhere here with kind of a built out reference design for that. Um, Furthermore, in my opinion, I think that in our how it works section, so that this is the how it works section would be all of this stuff right here, and it's kind of these pages that go into kind of explaining technical concepts for designers or product builders and how they work and stuff like that. And I think, in my view, stuff relating to managing fiat over the Lightning Network should probably live here, just in terms of giving designers and product builders a high level overview of how that technology works and what the trade-offs for that are. And then we have, of course, our research section right here. And we have a design research page, which is where we've kind of collated articles and research papers and things like that. And Patricia and others have been doing research into people trying to run businesses on top of Bitcoin. So for me, it seems like that would be the obvious case for where that type of material would live. Furthermore, there's been discussion within the outline document about, do we need guides that teach people kind of how to run their business on top of Bitcoin? That would be more of a user facing content, not necessarily the product builder content that we usually have in the design guide. So that I think that that's valuable content. I think that we might think of that as being separate content from the design guide itself. And the way I kind of think about that is as some kind of community project. We obviously we collaborate in the design community with wallets, with campaigns, with other types of projects, and we have this whole page on the design guide that just or on the community website that just shows all of the different projects that the community is involved with. So yeah, I mean, I guess to kind of visualize that and a high level overview, I think of the types of content that we might be building as, oh, I just messed that up entirely. Oh my God, my arrows are all moved around, but I think of it as being kind of updating the guide with a point of sale reference design, as well as how it works content, um, adding merchant related research to the design research page, and then the potential for, if somebody wants to take this on, a kind of how to accept Bitcoin, how to run your business on Bitcoin, that kind of thing, a user facing guide. And we think of that as being separate than the design guide. It's a community project that could be represented on the community projects page. So yeah, I've got this FigJam document everyone's playing around in. I've got the original outline. Christoph started there. I have my table of contents there, and I just want to kind of stop talking and just kind of open it up to discussion about what people think about any of these documents, the original outline, this FigJam, and so on.
I'm happy to kind of hop in. I think, well, first of all, this is a great overview and kind of intro to what's been done and what we might do. Um, I really like. I mean, I'm thinking a lot about where you pointed to the reference design. I think that at least for a lot of the folks on this call, probably familiar with the work Millie has been doing with what we're calling the LN Cash Register, which is a point of sale app. Um, and unfortunately, she's like on the road today, actually driving at the moment. So she wanted to make this call. So anyway, yeah, I think that the places that you've outlined make a lot of sense. I think one thing that could be interesting is like, and I don't know which spot this would go in, like an intro of like what does accepting Bitcoin as a merchant look like, or what is it, right? And like outlining some of the what we had in the original Google document, the outline, like setting the context for people designing for merchants, right? I feel like it's a bit of a subset of the Bitcoin world, right? Like people that want to build quote unquote circular economy, people that want to encourage spending, but there's a lot of people interested there. So I guess long-winded sort of way of getting to a question around like where do we see some of this, like about merchants or about like building circularity in Bitcoin living.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
You can go.
Okay. I just want to try to like understand what you're saying, because I like it, but I'm just trying to see, like, are you asking where sort of the circular economy aspect of this would live if not in the design guide? Just to clarify, you're asking if we'd put
Yeah.
that somewhere else. Okay.
No, Stephen pointed to, I think maybe it was the personal finance section was maybe the one area that I wasn't sure. It felt like, um, the content, at least as it's been in my mind, fits as neatly. I guess providing maybe like an ecosystem overview of merchants, or the merchant experience, right? And so what that, I guess, like what would be a good starting point in my mind for intro to like merchant design for merchants is like some of the things in that document of like where what types of merchants are there, right? Online, offline, right? Small, solo, large. So I'm guessing my question is like, where do we see that stuff living? Yeah.
I guess I saw it like in the persona section of like you are a like sole proprietor, you're like a person who's selling on Etsy, or maybe you're like representing a large corporation, like a public trade company, or maybe you were just doing a pop up and you're selling food for one day. I kind of saw that as being sort of like in the use cases and personas, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I mean, there's so many use cases; it's hard to really articulate all of them. But maybe we can make some sort of bucketing system where people could figure out where to go. I think ultimately, there's so many different types of people and businesses that it's going to be really hard. This might even just be like a first pass on a merchant section. I'm sure it'll change, and we'll need to do a lot more than one section for this. So it's a good question. Do you think it should live somewhere else other than the cases and personas?
Well, I'm actually kind of this is going to sound so bad. I'm not even. I'm having trouble finding that page on the guide anymore. Like I'm kind of wondering if that page has dematerialized.
What page is that?
Use cases and personas. Like the name rings a bell. Like I feel like it.
Sorry, Stephen. No, if you go back to the Google Doc, that's the one that I'm covering. So, I mean, that's just we're talking about kind of how we'd include it. It's just
Okay.
Right there to include. So maybe that can be an aspect of the table of contents too. Like it seems like maybe we need more clarity on that, so that way people know who. Like maybe there's like a background section, like history, and then maybe there's another section of like who it's for, like what types of builders and who you're building for, depending on scale and frequency, maybe.
Yeah, I got worried because we've done kind of a lot of rearranging this year, and I don't know, the name just sounds familiar to me. I feel like we might have had another page. Like I feel like we might have had a page that was called that at one point in time. But no, I think that this is good information, and like, yeah, that's a good question about like where it should go. I mean, I think you could make that kind of content live in a lot of places. It's like we have designing Bitcoin products. I mean, it could be a page like somewhere in here that's kind of, something along the lines of the kind of getting to know your users page, but it could just be, yeah, like a page going into all the kind of the nuance of different types of users. And when you talk about merchants, it becomes, even more detailed because, you're talking about different sizes of businesses and different locations. So yeah, I think you're right. I think we need to go into that content somewhere in here. I think I think one thing to consider is that like now that we are now that we have these reference design, kind of formatting for the guide, we have to think about if that's useful for the merchant section, right? So like the idea is that like, when we have this daily spending wallet, we're kind of, building it as like one kind of cohesive, finished looking product, and it's kind of targeted to a specific type of user with, with a specific set of needs. With the merchant kind of thing, it's like when you look at kind of like the range of different use cases here, that's a lot. And I'm trying to think, is it possible to come up with like a single reference design that just hits all of those different use cases there, or would our reference design really just be focused on like one of these kinds of use cases? It might be worth thinking about like should should the merchant section be a little bit more looser? Or should it be just kind of like a collection of design patterns that you might run into when dealing with merchant related things? Or should it be actually like a complete reference design like the other stuff that we're doing in the guide?
Yeah, that would be my recommendation too. I think I would not worry so much about the current table of contents in the guide. That also looked very different 2 years ago when we started, and then rearranged it a few times as the content came together. I would just maybe start, because it's like solving all the world's problem at once. I would just start really small and figuring out like what's one of the problems that people usually struggle with when they design these things. Okay, it's the display of two two currencies. Let's just make some content around that and not even worry about where it goes. And let's just start making useful content that addresses practical needs people have. And then some patterns will come around that anyways. With the personal finance, that's a good breakdown that then leads you to the idea that there are different types of Bitcoin wallet applications for different types of needs. And I assume for merchants, it'll be a similar thing. But the focus is still that you get to the point where like, okay, here's a design for a pretty specific product or a product category. So I would just start practically figure out what's the most useful content that people are actually dealing with, and then figure out how it comes together a little bit later.
Yeah, is there, I think I really like the idea of just like, solving problems in front of our faces as they're coming up. I think that, and to note what Patricia's got in the chat here as well, I guess my question is there a place, or what is the best place for us to maybe be building this content out alongside projects that we're working on? I mean, I know we have the Slack channel, which is helpful, but I think, is it in a table of contents in this document? Is it in GitHub, et cetera? I'm curious how you typically build these sections out, because like as an example, the cash register work Millie's been working on, I can drop the link in the chat just in case people want to cruise through it. Like there's a couple things here that are pretty tactical and actually really interesting from my perspective, that she's either doing or problems she's solving or questions she's coming across. And so I'll bring up two of them. One of them is it relates to the sort of the end user as well, which is like rather than or not or in addition to creating resources for the end user, how do you design the product so that it just makes sense for end users? And so in this case, she designed some interactions where like a merchant can share their link to their POS, and it says like pin to homepage, right? So like an employee of a pizza shop can go, oh, I can pin this to my homepage and I can accept sats on behalf of my employer. And so sort of designing for tutorials and walkthroughs for end users was something that was interesting. And then another, this is a bit of a question that she had, was like, do people use how do people use calculators or tally up bills, and would it be useful to have a calculator within a POS, right? To build an invoice, like by adding up a couple costs for products. And so these are a couple things that like I feel like as we are discussing them in Slack and design and Millie's designing them, we could simply be documenting them somewhere. So where should we be doing that? Because I feel like we could definitely be populating this stuff out along the way.
I guess the merchants channel is like a good place to start. We actually met, Millie and I met about this doc, which has actually come a long way since I saw it last. She's doing great. Yeah, I guess just let's put it in our channel right now. There's not that many of us, so it should be a pretty focused conversation. But I do wonder, one thing I was kind of struggling with as we were meeting was like, I really like this example, but I don't want to show, and I don't know, maybe you guys have better ideas about this. Like, I want to be able to show things that are good examples of what people are working with, whether they're businesses or individuals who are sellers. But I also like don't really want to show like preference over one company over another. I'm afraid people will get like a little bit defensive, but I would like to highlight the good work that's happening in the community, and I think Millie's example is a great one. So I'm wondering how we might integrate that. What do you guys think? Is it okay to just like add in drafts as long as they don't have people's personal information? Or do you feel like it becomes some sort of weird hierarchy thing? I just don't want to like accidentally step on toes, you know?
Well, from my perspective, it's really good when everything, and yeah, the design guide definitely takes kind of like a neutral stance, and also when it just kind of looks cohesive and visually similar. So like, a lot of times when we're mocking up, the like interfaces and the guide, we're just kind of like using components from the Bitcoin UI kit, and that I think that serves two purposes. Like one, it looks nice, and it looks like consistent. It gives like everything in the guide kind of this like cohesive look. Another, and also, it's time saver. Another thing too is that like to your point, Patricia, doesn't like actually. It's not like we're saying like, oh yeah, this company has the best thing. It's like, we can just kind of like brand everything as like this kind of like default super simple Bitcoin wallet. And then if people want to take that, run with it, put their own branding on top of it, that's great. So having said that, obviously like Millie is doing work here for Galoy. So I think, yes, if we should rely on this kind of research and design thinking, and discuss putting this kind of stuff in the guide, I might say like I might suggest that like when we actually put it in the guide, we might do like kind of like a generic like Bitcoin design branded version of it. It's kind of like using like UI kit, color palette and all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of like, you're not saying like you're not like promoting one specific company when you do that. But yes, I think we should rely on this kind of stuff. So I do, yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, Patricia, that the merchants channel is a good place to discuss this stuff. And then in terms of like Andrew, like turning this into content, for the guide, I think, a lot of times a great place to start for that is in a Google document, I think, or, some kind of shareable document link, just so that, we can start saying, okay, this document represents a potential page in the guide or an addition to an existing page in the guide. Here's, what we want to add. We can, discuss it at a very high level in the document there. People can provide feedback, leave comments, edit it, and then once the document gets to a more mature place, then that could actually turn into a GitHub pull request that would be merged onto the actual website.
Just to add something to the point about this being a Galoy project. So we have reference designs right now in the guide. But something we don't have, but we plan to have, is also a section called case studies. So while reference designs are pretty neutral in general, usable by pretty much, anybody can take this, and it's not tied to a specific company. The case studies were meant as documentation that is a little bit more opinionated, that can be ones, related, like specific design decisions that were relevant because one company and their architecture and their use case and, their audience and all of this stuff. So there, from Millie's file, there could be a case study come out of it that is exactly as it looks, right? This is the solution for Galoy. And then we could extract a more general version of this that maybe there's some custodial elements or so that are removed or whatever, that then becomes a more general guideline for people who build all kinds of different point of sale UIs.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think, and I wish Millie was here. Well, I'm sure she'll watch it and comment. But as most of you may know, most of the things Galoy does are open source, and so we want to be as synced up and develop in partnership with sort of like pushing the design guide forward, right, and be good contributors as well. And so I guess my question for Millie would be like, do you design Galloy version and then go back to a sort of Bitcoin design version, or is there a way to start from a foundation of UIKit and then like move on into the sort of skinning the Galloy version there afterwards? And so it's kind of an open question, but something worth thinking about.
My guess would be it's the former. I think that, for example, there might be things what Stephen mentioned earlier about showing multiple currencies. That's probably something that could be extracted here. You know, here on the left in Stephen's screen, I think you see units and symbols. That is also something that was extracted. Basically, pretty much everybody needs. And there could be another page below that, or it could be part of that page, a section that's called multi-currency display, for example. So my guess is that it's better to start with the specific product, the specific solution, and then extract best practices and guidelines that maybe appeared or came out of this product, but maybe were also seen in other solutions elsewhere.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that like the way I look at that is you know, primarily she's doing work for Galloy. So and we want companies to be involved in, you know, Bitcoin design and contribute back to open source, but not, you know, you shouldn't have to feel like that contributing to open source design is like kind of like getting in the way of the products you're trying to build, right? So I think that yeah, I'd agree. I mean, like I think that, you know, you and Millie should focus on like how, you know, how you're building, you know, the Galloy, you know, Lightning Cash Register, and doing that, you know, in a way that meets your users' needs, improves their lives, and then we can take the learnings after that. So I mean, yeah, I'm in agreement with what Christoph says there. I think too that you know, and another way, like I'm glad you brought up the case study, Christoph, because honestly, I completely forgot about that section. You know, one way to think about that, Andrew, might be like kind of like you're writing up a blog post. You know, you're writing up a blog post in a way that's like, you know, this is the problem that our users had, and here's the solution we came up with, and you know, it could have you know, a lot of the Figma screens that Millie is building and all of that, and then that could kind of, you know, we could bat that content around, and that could ultimately become a PR for the first case study on the design guide.
That's great. And actually, I think, yeah, I really like that direction because, yeah, rather than maybe thinking about how does this fit into the specific like table of content. I'm speaking now for myself, not just the design, but also for the case study written sort of description is like we can write based on what we've seen, what we've learned, what we've done, and then the lens of the Bitcoin design community can go, okay, well, okay, we should add this piece, right, and kind of pull from that. So I can definitely start a document and share it with you all about some of the things that we're solving and discussing.
That would be great. Thank you.
And I think that was a good advice from Christoph about earlier about starting off, you know, kind of designing for small problems, and then once, you know, we have kind of design patterns for these smaller problems, then kind of trying to assemble that into a cohesive section. From just kind of like a project management perspective, I was thinking maybe it would be a good idea, and if this maybe in this issue right here, or maybe in another issue, but basically we kind of could keep a running log of merchant related work people are doing, you know, whether those are, you know, Google documents or Figma files like the one Millie's working on, stuff like that. And then, you know, after say a couple of months, we have kind of this issue filled out with all these links to all these different merchant related design work that people have been doing. And then we could take a look at that and be like, okay, here's all the work that's been done thus far. How do we put this into the guide? So it's kind of a hybrid approach. We're not like locking ourselves into a specific hierarchy or contents right now, but we do have a framework. We're keeping track of all the good work people are doing. And then when we kind of have a bunch of work that's been done, we can say, okay, how would we organize this content that's sitting right in front of us?
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, we, as you've probably seen in the Figma, we're focusing at the moment on kind of that smaller solo or sort of few person operation. Not no ability to add products and stuff. So we're kind of grabbing a small chunk of the space, and so happy to kind of add that wherever makes sense, so that we can get a picture of what everybody else is working on.
So I'm kind of curious, just that seems like we have kind of a good kind of framework for moving forward here, just in terms of how we might build the content and how we're going to kind of keep track of it. Is there anything, we got a lot of material in this document here. Is there any like kind of specific, you know, things from this document that, um, people are confused about, or that you think we haven't really talked about well enough on this call, or anything that's not in this document?
I had one question for you guys. Just kind of curious what your thoughts are on this. And, there's this thing that I've noticed that a lot of sort of communities have, which is like directories. So, for example, like BTC Pay has like where to go if you're using this. So basically just like a place to plug merchants so they can find each other. And I know it'll change, like whoever is using it might stop using Bitcoin or they might start again. But I don't know if this is the right place since it's directed for builders. But I even feel like a lot of people's problems when I was talking to them is like they just don't know what to do when things break. And sometimes there's like Mattermost, like Alloy has Mattermost too. And people can go in there and ask their questions. I don't know if we should have like a community management aspect or something in here that kind of talks to people who are building about. It seems obvious, right? But like sometimes it's not that obvious to ask questions, or if you get stuck to where to go for help. I don't know if some kind of directory for like some of the major projects would be helpful. Trying to think how to answer the like where we should go if you need help type thing. Somehow in the design guide, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that.
Plebnet for merchants. I was looking for a fire emoji. Love that.
Yeah, the merchant channel could become that, but it really seems like you would need, this is really kind of a community building type of thing where just like Plebnet, it's about people helping each other run Lightning nodes. That's the purpose, right? Or am I misunderstanding that?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, and they're just very active groups and they're all really focused on that. That would be an ideal. And it could be a sub-community of the design community. But I think static content in the guide is probably not the answer for this particular problem. It's probably more like a buzzing community.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm like struggling to figure out. How do we include that?
Well, I guess
maybe we don't.
Sorry, Patricia. I just wanted to ask you just a question about like kind of like the content you're talking about. Were you talking about like the kind of stuff that's like that we need to highlight to product builders, that when they're building their products, they need to make it really clear where people need to go if they want help? Or were you looking more for like, just having some kind of website, community, yada, yada, for people who are running businesses on Bitcoin so that they can get help? Or did I misunderstand entirely?
No, you didn't misunderstand. I didn't articulate it well. That's on me. No, I guess I just feel like from a lot of people when I'm talking to them, just like kind of casual about their experience and sort of like, why did you stop using Bitcoin? Why, what's stopping your sales from this time period to this time period? It's usually because they don't know where to go, and that's a user problem, right? But I also feel like sometimes it's for people who are building, they get stuck and they don't like start doing updates, or they don't start releasing things because they just feel stuck. So I do feel like it's a bit of a thing where there's maybe not a lot of clarity around resources and what's helpful and how to keep moving forward. I mean, Christoph's right, and you guys are totally right. It is a community thing. You keep talking to each other and engaging, of course, but it felt like a lot of the feedback was people just getting stuck and not knowing where to go, because projects that maybe are so isolated. So yeah, I guess it just depends on what people are using, but I do feel like that somehow should be highlighted. I don't know how to do that in a static way because it's going to be so unique to each experience, but that's something I'm kind of like struggling to figure out. How do we create something that articulates a way to help people when they get stuck and need resources and need help?
Yeah, that
And
sounds. Sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say like something interesting about that is when you zoom out into the developing ecosystem of the merchant space and think about the different people who might come to a space, like I'll just call it a blood net for merchants to ask questions, right? You've got Bitcoin Design, you have product builders and designers from certain companies or projects. You have community leaders who are trying to onboard their community. So I'll just use like Patrick from Bitcoin Lake as an example, who is like onboarding merchants using the products that we build. And then you have potentially like merchants themselves, some of whom would, in my experience, be like quite interested in being tapped into a community and sharing like the things that they're doing. And I'll just use an example of a guy who's got like a Lamasu, like a Bitcoin ATM down at a coffee shop in Costa Rica, right? And he's like pretty active, and so they're it would be really interesting to have a place where all like that ecosystem can kind of come together and support each other, and share the ways the ways in which they're setting up their solution, the products their projects they're using, and to ask questions and get support. So I don't know, Patricia, if that's exactly where you're going, but like it does make me think about all the different people who might be attracted to a sort of a support mechanism like that.
Yeah, I guess it's not exactly where I'm going, but it doesn't mean it's not relevant or useful. I mean, I appreciate that. There's always something to learn. I think for me, I'm just noticing this whole, and maybe the design guide isn't the right place to put it, but I also would almost feel like I'm doing a disservice if like we make this section, then people just don't keep moving forward and improving and using this as something that is like a reference that's helpful to build. If I still know there's this whole, I don't know, maybe there's another home for it. I digress. We should focus on this, but it just feels like something that it's in the back of my mind that I feel like it needs to be included somewhere. Maybe this isn't it, but it's something
Actually,
on my mind.
Can I just maybe add Kate here? I have
Of course, thank you.
Part of why I'm here is because I'm looking at this from a merchant perspective, and this is a very important piece, I believe, that you're bringing up, Patricia, is looking at this table of contents even through the merchant's eyes, and seeing that perspective. I'm looking to receive sats via Lightning. That's a merchant perspective. That's a merchant question. The POS implementation for individual contributors that are content creators, let's say. So I feel like there's I've been trying to think about where to put in the table of contents here someone like myself that might come to this saying, okay, how do I do this for my business, right? And I might be looking to, I think somebody earlier said, oh, the users, and I'm even having trouble with that users. It's like the kind of merchant that we're talking about it's in here, because it's very confusing sometimes for a newcomer to say, who is the user? Is the user the customer? Is the user the merchant? But if you're very specifically looking for practical guidance or practical solution to receive sats via Lightning, then where's my next step? Is that helpful at all?
Hey, yeah, no, that's great points you bring up. It is helpful because I think it just kind of like, it's maybe something we all acknowledge, but I don't really know where to put. But maybe this is part of that sort of, we were talking about earlier, this user guide, one that's like more directed towards merchants, but I also feel like builders run into issues too. So it feels like it's on both ends. I'll have to give this a think because I don't want to completely dominate our conversation with this, but it is like something that I think from even both perspectives, like as you said, Kate, from someone who is a merchant and someone who is building, like it still feels like there's these holes that need to be filled. So if anyone else has ideas, maybe it's a completely different thing, but I think it needs to be articulated somewhere.
Well, I think that's what we're aiming to figure out too. It's like, how do we make this easier for the next, who's ever coming behind to pave the way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is valuable stuff we're talking about. I think that such a guide would be hugely beneficial to a lot of people. You know, I maintain my kind of previous opinion that I think that the guide is definitely a you know, a resource focused on product builders, designers, developers, product managers. And I think that if we try to make user facing content, I think that you know is ultimately going to, I think, confuse us internally about what we're trying to build, and I think will confuse people on the site, kind of stumbling between content that is made for them and content that isn't made for them. But so having said that, I don't think it's content for the design guide, but I think that it's incredibly valuable content and that somebody should build it. And I think that a lot of people in the design community would be interested in working on a project like that. I know, Christoph pointed out in the chat that there's Hello Bitcoin, which is kind of a user-facing, project for, kind of educating people about the value of Bitcoin. You could think of it as something kind of like that, of, an education-focused thing. They've got a community, all of that. I think another way of thinking about it is there's this, I can't remember the URL off the top of my head, but there was someone who made like Bitcoin for small businesses. There was kind of like this like pamphlet you download and you change the details for your community and you print it out. So it's kind of like, that's another example of this kind of like merchant facing content that's designed for onboarding people. So I think that Bitcoin for local business, thank you for dropping the link in there, Christoph. I mean, so my opinion is conceptualize it like that, conceptualize it as this awesome resource that's like, if you're a business thinking about starting Bitcoin, the obvious place to start your journey is, this website, this community. So I think that, yes, so I think that somebody should build it. And I think that start a channel for it in Bitcoin design, get some people interested in it. Maybe someone who would be interested in building a really nice looking landing page for a product like that. And then hopefully, people who are really interested in, really good at working with merchants on these kind of things could be kind of community maintainers for that, whether it has a Telegram channel, Slack channel, Discord, whatever that looks like. But I think that would be an incredibly valuable resource for merchants.
Yeah, and I wonder if we can list some of these resources too, since they seem relevant. I don't exactly know where, but maybe we can provide some kind of resource guide too. Stuff that just feels appropriate for this section.
Yeah, I think that type of effort really just requires some people to just make it happen. And I think if you start writing a guide for merchants how to do this and that, it doesn't even matter where it is. It could be on GitHub, could be on Medium, it could be anywhere else. You just need to start creating the content, set up a community, and share the word. It's just a very different type of activity to build and manage that type of community and just be around and be helpful, and to listen to the people when they discuss solutions, to actually document them and organize that information. So feel free to take that on. I don't have time for it, unfortunately, because I also think that would be really interesting to do. Could do a shout out in Slack or in the newsletter or Twitter or so somewhere. See if some people are interested in that.
Yeah, we have the community call too. Maybe it's something we could chat about too. See if anybody has any ideas around that.
And I think that those kinds of things, if you were going to start like a merchant focused community and, like stuff like that, like kind of, designing like logo and branding and imagery and stuff like that for these kinds of projects are really kind of fun, like first issues for new contributors in the design community as well. So we're getting up pretty close to the hour here. Got a lot of good material here. I'm going to kind of compile I've been kind of jotting down some notes here. And so I'm going to kind of, post some call notes in the Slack channel after this. But I was just kind of curious if there's any other kind of topics or issues we haven't gotten to yet.
Well, I'm curious if there are anybody has an idea of immediate next steps that they want to take, or if we even want to have any.
I would like to take this document maybe and figure out a way in which we can just refine it and like finalize the table of contents, which I can share if we're all on the same channel for merchants. I can kind of take this and I also took like a couple of notes on the call, maybe synthesize it if that's okay, and sort of build off of some of these points. That would be my first thing. I think we could start on this, and then yeah, if anybody else has any comments or anything or feedback, I think we could take it to the channel.
This is Elena. Hi, everyone. This might be a little meta, but I am very interested in kind of like Bitcoin design and just in general the community. So I've been a fly on the wall for a few meetings, and one thing I think might be valuable, and I'm happy to raise my hand for it, is just a short instruction of like, if this is your first meeting, like how to navigate, like people follow the agenda here. Don't feel like you need to jump in, but if you do, like this is generally a good place to add comments. Just I don't know how many new people like drop in on these calls regularly. Maybe it's just me, but yeah, if that seems like appropriate or if it would be valuable, I'm happy to raise my hand for it.
I think that'd be really valuable, actually.
Yeah, go for it. I think from my immediate thoughts, it would be good if such information was included kind of like in the, I don't know, the call issue on GitHub where all the details are, like, it seems like there could be some kind of other data there. But yeah, if you have ideas on how to improve that, Elena, open to hear them. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. I would say I do a few Web3 communities. I would say this one is very well organized. So I don't think it's lack of information. It's more just kind of like a first person's perspective. Like this was my experience. And I'm not sure if like encouraging more people to join is an objective, but if somebody does find themselves like joining these calls, it might be helpful. But yeah, I'll add that to my to-do list.
Yeah, that's excellent. I just posted a link here. For some of our regular calls, like the community call, we have these documents that outline how they're organized and, what to talk about and just small stuff. I think we have that currently for design reviews and for community calls, but it is a good idea to document some of these other things. I think we're better organized with the regular calls that are hosted by the same people, like community calls we've done for 2 years now. And when it comes to the more project-specific calls, I think that's usually a bit more loose, and the group kind of self-organizes a little bit there. Doesn't mean it has to be that way. That's just my impression.
So to your question, Christoph, about like kind of next steps, I have some. I mean, I think, that's, very wise, but just kind of like you said, about just kind of starting with small things and, kind of working on the structure later. So I would say, let's just don't even worry about this like table of contents document like so much. sometimes I just like to go ahead and create structure just so that it starts a conversation. Um, so I think let's not focus on this so much. But what I would say is I want to start a tracker issue. Like I said, where we start kind of keeping a log of all of the merchant related design work people are doing, so that way we'll have all of it logged in one place. So the tracker issue is one next step. And I think I'd also like to open an issue for how it works, fiat over Lightning page. That just is like kind of, that seems like low hanging fruit, just for kind of talking about it, just giving the high level overview. So I think that kind of content could kind of exist separate than a lot of the other kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that those seem like good next steps for me. And then again, like Andrew, if you need any help in terms of thinking about how you might build, you and Millie might build a case study together or something, then please reach out about that. I could go ahead and open an issue for that too, a kind of like Galoy Lightning Cash Register case study, if that would be helpful, because then you would have kind of a centralized place to discuss that moving forward. So those would be my next steps after this call, in addition to kind of posting some rough call notes.
That'd be great. And I would that's kind of my next step, is to start surfacing some of the information, challenges, solutions, things that we're doing. So yeah, if you point me in a direction in terms of where's the best bucket for me to connect that into the community, I'm happy to start populating that.
And I will also, while I'm looking at it, I'm just seeing a pretty big part that I think I'll start on, because it needs to be started on, the existing merchant applications. I probably won't be as thorough as possible, but I can get a little bit more detail in there. That way people have it to work off of in our Figma file.
And looks like Elena already left. We have 4 Elenas in Slack. I'm not sure which one she is. Okay, one thing that I would like to work on, not immediately, but I think that's because I worked on the units and symbols page, and I think tackling the multi-currency display is something that kind of builds on that, and that would also be good to have in the UI kit. So I can't work on it immediately, too much other stuff going on, but over the next, I don't know, weeks, month or so, something that could take over if nobody else wants to deal with that one. And I think that's an easy one to get done.
That would be great.
And I could open an issue for that one as well. Well, awesome. It is about the hour. I think we can go ahead or maybe Christoph, do you think it's time to wrap up? Could you kill the recording?